the Married and Connected podcast. This is the podcast to hear authentic stories of marriages that have gone from ashes to excellence, a mixture of science and biblically based tips to improve your own marriage, and experts in fields that will help you navigate the good, the bad, and the in-between of marriage. I am your host for the show, Cameron Alaricki. I'm an Enneagram 2 with a 1 wing, a former public school teacher turned Gottman certified marriage coach, intentional about practicing in my own relationship what I'm preaching to you. I'm an avid self-improvement reader, passionate about homeschooling our 2 boys, a firm believer in Jesus, and that nothing will change you for the better more than traveling. That being said, this podcast is set up as if you and I were old friends, sitting together, drinking coffee, sharing all of our deepest secrets of marriage, life, kids, and the things that set our souls on fire. If improving your marriage, authenticity, and growth are your jam as much as they are mine, you're in the right place, and I couldn't be more excited to have you here. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Leave a review, and don't forget to share to your socials so that more people can better their marriage along with you. Thanks for listening, and let's jump into this week's episode. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Married and Connected podcast. Today's guest is a world-renowned strength coach and metaphysical architect of human potential. As the founder of legendary Diablo Barbell, he became known globally for producing more elite qualified lifters than any other coach alive. But his true genius lies in the systems that he created. Paraphysical training, a revolutionary model that trains not just the body, but the being. Body recomp training, which is my personal favorite because that's the one that I've gone through, which is a method that moves the body's chemistry from disruption to alignment. It rewires your identity and rebuilds resilience from the inside out. With over 30 years of experience coaching elite athletes, as well as operating as an executive coach for CEOs, special forces, first responders, and everyday warriors, Ted O'Neill's mission is to build leaders and awaken superhuman potential through discipline and self-mastery. On a personal level, Ted was the coach out of the $100,000 that I have spent on coaches that has helped me overcome my food addiction, lose 30 pounds and counting, and alongside his amazing wife, Dr. Andrea Vitz, who I talk about on this podcast all the time, and you also heard her in episodes 74 and 81, is one of the only other coaches that I've ever worked with that even in a simple 10-minute conversation will still throw out 3 to 5 things that you'll want to tattoo on your face. So grab a notebook, something to write with, and get ready for Coach Ted O'Neill. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
Wow. Thanks, Cam. Thanks for having me. And thanks for such a great intro.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Good. Me too. I'm really excited for my audience to hear you this time. They've heard Andrea a couple of times. That has been amazing, of course. But today I want to dive into one of your creative genius projects that I think is really going to help couples and especially the men in this world. That is 2 specific programs that you have partnered with and created, which on purpose, and then helping men discover and live into that leadership and awaken that superhuman potential through discipline and self-mastery. So with that said, one of the biggest reasons I think, and I mean, you guys coach couples too, so you can give me your opinion on this, but I think that marriages are ending not so much because of communication problems or arguing or infidelity, but more so around complacency. So what are your thoughts and where does that come from? And then how do you overcome it?
Wow. Okay. Super interesting way to look at that. Let's go with that for a second. This concept of complacency. I say that complacency and contentment is like the killer of all dreams. And so it's interesting that you say that that's one of the main reasons. And I think what happens for most couples, and I've talked about this in couples coaching before, and I believe I've talked about it like in our man school training that I lead, as well as on purpose. I firmly believe, in having worked with so many people, that almost no one is qualified to be in a relationship.
Facts. Or at least I would absolutely agree with
that. I'm gonna fill that in a little bit too. But when I say that, let me give some context to this. And I don't mean permanently not qualified to be in a relationship, but initially starting as such. For example, like if you were starting a business, and maybe shy of starting a lemonade stand, but an actual business, you wouldn't take your life savings and just throw it into something and then hope for the best.
Right.
You would spend probably a year doing market research. You would spend a huge amount of time interviewing people. You would spend time in business planning, capacity planning, strategic planning, all these things. Every nuance would be accounted for.
Yeah.
You would look at competition in the marketplace. You would think about what assets you would have. You would think about what your burn rate is. You would think about what your exit strategy is before even beginning. Yet in relationships, we kind of jump in based on just attraction.
Yeah. Chemistry.
That's chemistry. So there's like two questions that I usually ask people that they answer pretty much universally. And I'll say, well, what was your original reason getting together? Most people would say we had great, and you already said it, chemistry.
Yep.
So we know there's a little bit of a problem with this, because when we're in that state, we're not really thinking from a logical part of the brain, and we're not really thinking in terms of planning. We have this sense that everything is just going to somehow work out, and we tend to throw caution to the wind, and then later we're disappointed.
Yep.
And then we'll say things like, you changed. Well, no one changed. We didn't really vet the situation properly. We didn't spend the time on the functional groundwork that creates the foundation that a great relationship is built on. So it doesn't mean that you can't have great chemistry, but in those moments in time, you have to really kind of slow down and think long term about, like, who are we going to be? What are we about? How are we going to combine our uniquenesses into like a synergistic combination of me and you to become greater than the sum of our parts? This is kind of like part one. There's a part two to this that speaks to what I mentioned, the qualification part before. And I think Stephen Covey said it best. Are you familiar with Stephen Covey?
Yeah.
All right, good, because he's kind of like almost a generation or maybe two ago now. And so I just kind of wondered.
Got some great books, though.
He has some amazing books. That one of his main book was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If for those who have heard about that or maybe read it 30 years ago, give that a revisit.
Yeah. He's also got 7 Habits. I think my 15-year-old, that's one of the books that I required him to read this year for homeschool curriculum was 7 Habits. I think it was 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers. And then there's highly effective couples. There's so many that he's got.
He franchised the entire concept. But one of the things that Covey said that I find to be so impactful is he has this whole module on dependence, where we're reliant on things outside of us. And this so closely lifted Academy's curriculum that it always stands out as a teaching point for me. If you're dependent on things outside of you, situations, circumstances, personalities to affect how you feel inside of you.
Yeah.
But Covey's conviction was, as long as you're dependent, you can't be depended upon. So most people jump into a relationship and they're instantly dependent and or codependent. And it's within those spaces that while they're in that elevated chemistry, they're actually sowing the seeds of resentment down the line. So here's the intersection, because you asked about how this relates to men.
And complacency.
And complacency, yes. So I look at it this way: if a man is ruled by his compulsions, he has no control over his body.
Yeah.
If a man is ruled by reaction, he has no control over his emotions. If a man is ruled by judgment, he has no control over his thoughts. If a man is ruled by fear, he has no connection with the infinite. And if a man does not have purpose, a life charter, and a mission statement, then he is unfulfilled, agitated, depressed, and aimless. All of those elements speak to dependence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is something that for me, I've spent like 30 years, this particular conundrum. Like, how do we, as multidimensional beings, having this experience under the impression of linear time, how do we create some kind of life mastery where we can navigate above situation and circumstance? And again, referencing Covey, he put that a little bit differently. He mentioned principles over personalities, which is kind of like another universal saying, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really speaking to the same thing. Like as long as we're in the space of personality or situation and circumstance, those are highly subjective places to be. And that means we're very malleable to outside suggestion. So I could be having, quote, a great day. Someone can come in and completely throw me off course by their opinion.
Yep.
And as long as I'm giving my power away, if I'm dependent on things outside of me, in other words, if I haven't done the work to align with my purpose, if I haven't done the work to gain command over my body, if I haven't done the work to gain control of my mental aspect, my mental clarity, my focus, my ability to have discernment and critical thinking, and if I haven't learned how to control my emotions, then I'm going to be completely unglued if someone has an opinion that doesn't match mine or something
Yep.
that collides with my worldview. And now I'm going from having a good day to a bad day. So this is the story since the dawn of recorded time.
Yeah.
And yet, as human beings, we persist in this drama, even though this has never worked one time for anyone anywhere in history. Controlling through will, personality, situation, and circumstance. And so for me, getting down to these core causes and conditions is so central to like the curriculum that I teach at Lifted Academy, because what we found is every one of these problems has a solution.
Yeah.
And as it relates to intimate relationships, if you're not looking forward, like to get home every day to be with your person, if your home isn't a sanctuary where you feel the most secure and protected and most creative, then there's elements that can be enhanced to put you in position to be in a much better place. What happens
Absolutely.
with most people, unfortunately, is they end up like with like a hostile roommate who
Yeah.
helps collaborate on paying expenses, and like battle lines are drawn every day on mundane things like the chores not being done, or this isn't done, or we didn't communicate this, or you did this and it upset me. And so I think we've gotten so far out of balance in terms of relationships, and it kind of goes back to like what you said, chemistry. If that's the basis for our attraction, if that's the foundation that we've built our relationship on, then when that chemistry goes back down into the normal day-to-day experience, we're both then left with what we came in with. And that's usually all manner of unresolved imprints and traumatic experiences and limiting self-beliefs, especially as it relates to our significant others, potential otherwise, past or present. And those are our most vulnerable places.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to a couple of things that you said in there. The compulsions. So for people that are, new to this or this idea of emotional sobriety, or even, as they're thinking about this is not just compulsions like, eat, like for me with the food addiction that you helped with, I would just eat mindlessly. Or I would eat whether I was happy, sad, pissed, excited, like stressed. It didn't matter what emotion I had. That was my coping mechanism. But compulsions are not just that. It's everything. Like it's everything from porn to smoking, drinking. It can be eating, but what are some other compulsions that you see specifically as it relates to men and how they're coping with maybe of like that's their avoidance of their marriage problems or the chemistry that they have or whatnot?
You gave a really good list. There are others though. I mean, this is a thing where I've encountered so many men, we'll say adult males, maybe we'll try that angle first,
Yeah.
who are involved, like you mentioned, like porn, excessive social media, gaming,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
and these things. So one of the things that I when I speak to the men in the man school curriculum, sometimes it's a little more direct to kind of get people to wake up, because I work with a lot of people, and a lot of the CEOs I work with, some of these are named CEOs that people know who they are. Some of these people are 100 millionaires plus, and there's a commonality with this. First off, none of these people have time for games.
Yeah.
They're too busy thinking about impacting the world. So they're not spending countless hours scrolling through social media and playing games as an adult. So these are places where men have learned to check out. But like you mentioned, compulsions. There's something that I define as the body-centric state, which is the cycle of addiction. And so I want to touch on that real quick because you brought up compulsions. That's like the second level of addiction. So in the way that I view addiction, I see it as cravings, compulsions, and mental obsessions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different stages of these things. So like a craving, for example, you mentioned food earlier, so we'll talk about food real quick. When you have an active chemistry in your body, you consume something, it creates a biological response. In other words, you just gave your body an instruction. This can be food, it can be caffeine, it can be alcohol, whatever it is as an active physiology. There's some kind of a response in reaction to the instruction you just gave to your body by consuming it. If you repeat this frequently enough, that becomes the new order that you're giving your body. This is the biochemical state that we're creating based on the way that I'm feeling. So most of these things, by the way, are coping mechanisms. They're external relief systems or some kind of external enhancement strategy. I'm looking for something outside of me to change how I feel inside of me. So if I drink coffee or if I have that glass of wine at night, whatever that is, over enough repetition, because all training is repetition based.
Right. Right.
Body then creates a craving. When you don't have that chemistry in the body and you have that same thought, now there's a void because we've learned to match the external substance with the feeling inside. So let's say I recognize that these things are taking me down a trajectory that I no longer want to go into, because that's people have to have step one at some point. And maybe you have to white knuckle it. And so you put down whatever the destructive food or the sugar or the caffeine or the alcohol, or in this case, even the porn or the gaming. Once you're past that physiological state that's been repeated over and over, you're past what's called cravings. You now actually kind of move down the chain in the cycle of addiction into what I call then compulsions. And the compulsion is the awareness of the space that behavior and or substance used to occupy in your life. It's now been displaced, and either there's a void or you replaced it with something different. I can see people all the time shifting one addiction for the other. But if you, let's just say in this case, someone takes it out with the idea of making progress in their life, the void that they recognize creates the compulsion. It feels like a craving, but it's a little different because it's no longer an active physiology. Now we're recognizing the mental space that's been left open, that void from not having this or not having this as our go-to anymore. Now, this is still a white knuckle phase, by the way, because these things feel very similar, but it is subtly different because you're really moving from like an internal chemistry into the recognition of habit. The last stage of what I call the cycle of addiction is a mental obsession. And that looks something like this. Man, I'm sure glad that I stopped doing XYZ. Again, fill in the gap: sugar, caffeine, alcohol, porno, whatever. It's been 30 days maybe. I'm sure glad I gave that up. My life is so much better. I bet if I had that cup of coffee this morning, it would feel really good. I've been really good.
Yeah.
So let's see.
I've been really good. I've been really good. I want to touch on that. I've been really good. So you think that you can do it again because you've been really good.
I like saying this because it's contentious and it kind of makes people face their things. It's a form of mental illness.
Yeah.
Mental obsession is a form of mental illness. In other words, we're not operating from a place of like a high cognitive value, because we just said, I'm glad I got rid of this. And yet now it won't hurt me. And here's how.
You're going to try to justify it.
I'm going to try to justify it, and I'm going to go back into that. And then what happens? The moment I re-engage it, I've now recreated the active chemistry. Now I'm back in the cycle of craving. Now, there's an extra layer of problem to this. And this is why addictions can be so persistent for people. There's a way that the brain and the body responds around this. And this is why this is such a slippery slope. And I really want people to get this. I'm going to back up one step for this for context. In some advanced learning systems, you learn, and like musicians do this all the time. They learn something really complex as a piece, And
Mm-hmm.
the moment they have it like in their hands and in their brain, they can play it either by sight reading or through memory, and they play it fluently at speed, and they've mastered this, they intentionally forget it for a period of time. If
Mm.
it's something that's really challenging them at a high level and they need to be flawless in their performance. And this works for anything. It can be for like a speech that you're giving, a presentation on high level things. You intentionally forget it for a period of time to where you can't do it. Like you just totally take it out of your practice and out of your mind. You bring it back in a short time later, and at first it'll be a little clunky, but then as you repractice, you drive those neuro grooves deeper into your brain. So this is known in advanced learning concepts as a way to really solidify that learning such that in some cases you'll never forget it. Now, think about it. That's known on the affirmative in
Mm-hmm.
advanced learning circles. But what happens when we cave into that mental obsession in the cycle of addiction? We're doing the exact same thing. So when we come back around to that loop of cravings again, it's much stronger,
Yeah.
much stronger. And it becomes more and more challenging because when we get to the compulsion stage, if we get there, we have all these extra reasons that we've built in our neural network about why this is something we need. So this is where people get into lifelong habits that they can't break and they feel totally stuck. And that's the nature of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction is a very real thing. It's a tremendously misunderstood thing because all the things we mentioned, like all those external relief systems, or what I sometimes call metabolic disruptors, are all things outside of us. But the most persistent addiction that we have as human beings is to our thoughts. And those thoughts that stem from negative self-beliefs, we have millions of repetitions around. And we have probably tens of thousands of times of thinking, I'm not going to do that anymore, and then going back to it. So it
Yeah.
literally becomes hardwired in the brain. And this is why I say every single day, I once counted how many days I said this in a row to someone, but I always quote that the emotional sobriety movement, I believe, is the most important movement of our time for exactly this reason. And when I say this reason, this is the drama that the human being has played every single day across the planet since the dawn of recorded time. And we haven't yet societally committed to a course of action where we break this cycle. Our thoughts create the greatest addiction. What's even more challenging about that is we know in neuroscience that 90% of our adult personality is developed in the first 7 years of our life.
Yeah.
What's even worse than that is 95% of the time in a fully formed brain, we're repeating that 90% cycle. This is, by the way, the reason that this has been persistent through all of time.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into strategies to break this, to me, are super exciting. Like a lot of people think, man, that's a lot of work you're talking about. To me, it's like, wow, we have the opportunity societally to do something that's never been done in history before. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's break these
Yeah.
patterns. Let's break free. Like true freedom and fulfillment is on the other side of all these external relief systems and metabolic disruptors and cravings, compulsions, and mental obsessions. Life looks way different when you've overcome those things and the patterned repetitive behavior that is specific to every human being. That's why Dr. Vitt says in her book, we all always have only one problem, and that's ourselves.
That's ourselves. I want
Yeah.
to I want to go back to and apply this to marriage. So often I see marriages end, and this is one of the things is that on the divorce, when you file for a divorce, you have to give a reason, right? And most states now in the United States are like they're no fault states. So whether I mean, if you have like really blatant evidence that there was infidelity, okay, that might work for you if you've been in a relationship or been married for longer than 10 years or there's alimony involved or whatever. But for the most part, for marriages that end before the 10-year mark, which most do, what happens is that it's irreconcilable differences, which for me, that's not really even a thing. Like now that I've gone through EMSO, now that I've talked to you guys and like learned from you guys for over a year now, irreconcilable differences are not a thing. They are like, you might as well change that box to be, well, I couldn't get over my shit. I couldn't get over my self-beliefs. I couldn't get over my filters. I didn't want to do the work. I didn't, and that goes back to that complacency. And
Yeah.
so, and it also goes into not having a purpose. And so I really want to dig into that if you don't have a purpose, you're going to continue to be complacent. But these compulsions and these cravings and mental obsessions, we've been talking about how they are these external sources of things that you're consuming. But what I really want to drive home for people that it's not just the porn, the gaming, the sugar, the alcohol, the caffeine, all of that. Yes, those are disruptors. But the biggest disruptor in marriage, when you're looking at the problems that you have, are my partner is the problem, not me. I don't need to change. You do. I don't need to do the work. What I'm doing is right. So it's a lot of judgment. It's a lot of those emotionally triggered behaviors that we talk about all the time. It's a lot of judgment. It's a lot of self-centeredness. But it's also, and this is something else I want to dig into a little bit later, it's one partner's need for freedom. It's the idea that freedom exists just on the other side of the fence, and that the grass.
Let's punch a big hole in this concept of freedom by
Yeah.
cutting and running, by not having the fortitude to work through our problems. Because
Ooh, fortitude. Okay, define that, because I love that word.
There's an element of this that has to do with the will. And there's a whole module I teach on the will, which is, you can be look at that as the channeling of your vital forces toward an outcome. And when people don't have strong will, then they're in the demonstration of weakness, essentially, or weak will. And weak will can also be looked at as untrained will, because we all hear this word willpower, but where does it come from? What is it? How do you specifically train it? Like whenever I always like to challenge these concepts, people say you have no willpower. And it's like, yeah, you've probably never been on a course of attempting to train your willpower. Or people say, well, we don't have great communication. Okay, how much time specifically have you spent on communication modules? Or someone doesn't have great emotional sobriety. How much emotional training do you do per day? We generally think of training as being something that just sits in the physical space where we go doing an exercise routine. But physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if we're not attempting to train in the affirmative, then we're getting worse every single day. So this concept of fortitude would have to do with weak will or untrained will. So I kind of walk this through step by step. Like weak will is just that, is you haven't been in a place where you've had to exert yourself and commit to an outcome regardless of how that feels. Like a lot of people will say something like in a relationship setting, I remember I was coaching this one couple, and it was a horrible time for them to engage because they had just rebounded and they're all full of chemistry, like dopey-eyed, foaming. It was bad. And they were in this little squabble, and he looked over and said, I'm always going to feel this way about you. And I said, you sure? And he's like, yeah. And I said, I'm going to hold you to that, dude, because I just watched you say that. And of course, then 3 weeks later, they're on their 5th breakup and the whole bit. And it's like, hey, you lost your ability as an exit strategy the moment you said that. So this is one of the things I teach in man school. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. Because if you start breaking into these spaces where you're making commitments and you're assuring and you're just full of chemistry, that's just being weak. Because on the back end of that, there's a consequence. And the consequence isn't a punishment, by the way. It's what happens next as a logical conclusion. Well, what happens next as a logical conclusion when you make a spoken agreement and a verbal contract with someone is that you then uphold your end of the bargain. Yeah. Doesn't matter that you now think that you're bored or something else has happened, because you no longer feel that because you have some other motive for saying that in the moment. Then you got to man up. Otherwise, that's a direct reflection on who you are in this case as a man in the relationship. You made a promise, you got it, and you can't point the finger and say, yeah, but you broke, yeah, but all this nonsense. No. So this poor individual was kind of held to the fire for that for a period of time, because in my world, you just don't get to throw those platitudes out there and then, yeah, but your way through the entire relationship where now it's somehow someone else's fault. So the training of the will, if you have an untrained will, you have to use what I call force of will for a period of time. And that's where you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and commit to the very thing that you said. And that might feel hard. Good. Because if it felt easy, you're probably not learning anything. It was easy when you said it. The execution might be difficult. Tough. That's how you become tough, is you pull up and you follow through with your commitments. That's force of will. In other words, I'm white knuckling it. All right, I said this. Now I got to find a way to do it. Here's how I do it. It might take a little while, but every time you follow through with those commitments that you made and you do it at least in the attempt of the right spirit, you've now built your will a little bit. And what this ends up with is what we then call willpower, but not in the conventional sense. I like to use willpower a little bit differently. Willpower is the speed in which you can execute your will. Because power is actually, well, I don't want to go too far into a tangent, but in physics, power is force equals mass times acceleration. That's a definition of power. There's a time component in there. So willpower, to me, if you've had weak will and you've practiced through force of will, now you arrive at willpower. In other words, you can quickly enact your will. I said this, therefore I do it. I do it right now. I don't wait. I jump into action when my will is needed, when my fortitude needs to be on demonstration display. I now jump into action in the affirmative. And if you practice willpower for long enough, you've now built your strength of will. So there's levels to this. Now, the problem as it pertains to men in relationships, and the reason I have a program is called Man School, is most men haven't gone through that training. And so not only do they lack fundamental purpose, but they lack will. And so if you look at like each day as an opportunity, or said differently, each day as a container that you're going to pour your vitality and your energy into, if you walk this through all the steps of the human experience, most men are leaking energy everywhere. So they don't have any vitality left to fulfill their promises because they're too busy spending it on cravings, compulsions, mental obsession, and wandering aimlessly through life because they've not yet defined their purpose.
Yep. Totally agree.
All right.
But I want to go back real quick.
Yeah.
I want to go back real quick because as you're white knuckling through and you're building this willpower, because I know so many people are going to come back and be like, okay, but what about happiness? What if you're white knuckling through the hardships of a marriage and you're building this willpower, where does, but I just want to be happy fall into? Because you're not, I mean, that's not happiness when you're white knuckling that, right?
Happiness is an illusion because it's transitory. Happiness is based on personality, circumstance, and situation. What most people, I think, are really seeking is this concept of freedom. That's where you're going. So I want to talk about the difference between like happiness, joy, and freedom, and the illusions of those things.
Okay.
Right now, so I already defined happiness. Happiness. This is the danger of happiness. There's always going to come a point. I hope your listeners understand and can forgive me that if I'm on long enough, I'm going to offend a whole bunch of people.
I love it. I would rather it just offensiveness just weeds out the people that aren't supposed to be listening. It's fine.
All right, so let the weeding begin. This is one of these things that I've seen like in adults where they start to assign happiness to things like external events. Let's use a birthday, for example. This is one of my favorite ones. So people have all these expectations, or said differently, premeditated resentments about how their birthday should go. As a grown-up, I might add, my birthday cake wasn't right. I didn't get the right card. And I said, where are we in this world right now? It's like, you're a grown-up. You're really telling me that you're upset about your birthday. You're not 5 years old, but we grandfather these ideas in with us. So I say that in part to be funny because I know that people have these things, but then again, it's like we talked about this, where these beliefs follow us through formative times in our brain. But really, it's like that's how tenuous happiness is, to where I could be having like my birthday celebration, I'm happy, and then I get the wrong card or something now. So happiness isn't the thing. It's too circumstantially and situationally dependent on my beliefs. And so joy would be a better state, but even joy really isn't that. Joy, at least, is a big step in the right direction, because that's a state of being, right? A state of being that aligns with greater principle. So in other words, when you get to the place, and this is one of the teachings in the emotional sobriety curriculum that sounds like magic or internal alchemy, because it is, You can learn to create your own states of being without a situation or circumstance. And so you don't need the birthday party to feel happy. You can learn through training, by the way. It's not smoke and mirrors or imagination. You can learn how to cultivate the experience of joy within you at a high level without having to have an event. Now, people say, well, I don't think that's possible. You do it all the time. Like we just usually affirm it in the negative. And if you're driving to work and you're nervous about that talk with your boss, that talk hasn't happened yet. You've created a state of being called anxiety based on a thought. That's epigenetics. So joy is important, to be in the space of joy. But what's even better is fulfillment. But fulfillment has to be earned, especially in relationships, because the first chasm you have to get over is going from being dependent to being independent. Because again, like I said in the beginning, dependent people can't be depended on.
Right.
So the best you're going to get in that space of dependence is happiness, and it's going to be fleeting, and it's going to be circumstantial, and you're going to have good days and bad days. To me, that would suck as a life to live, just personally speaking. I've been on, because if you can have good days and bad days, then that's opening the door for I can't imagine having an entire bad day. I've had all manner of circumstances and situations that at one point in my life would have made it for a bad month. I've forgotten about it 15 minutes later. I'm too busy moving forward. So this whole idea of moving from dependence to independence becomes vital. But to do that, we really have to have control over ourselves. And to me, this is the foundation for any kind of long-term union to be successful. Because when you do this, this is how you begin to get toward fulfillment. If you're not independent going into the relationship, then we're most likely, and I'll say always through my 30 years of experience doing this, trauma bonding. We're finding the individual places, and a lot of times we're even doing it through a motive-based way, even if we're not aware. We're looking for attention. We're looking for validation. We're looking for someone to, quote, complete us. If you're looking for that, your life's going to suck. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So we have to get to this place where we don't need any of those things. Like our needs are much less than the average person, because we can cultivate our own experience internally through the work that we've done. But a huge part of this starts with fulfillment, because I use the word fulfillment very specifically. Fulfillment is a direct result of living a life that is full of purpose. In my experience, in my learning, you can't arrive at fulfillment without being aligned with purpose in a day-to-day, moment-by-moment way. You can be happy at times. You can experience and cultivate the state of joy, but fulfillment is something totally different. Now, freedom we mentioned as well. Freedom, again, is actually what most people think is freedom is actually a form of slavery. So I want to touch on this real quick, because you mentioned how people think freedom is the other side of the fence.
Yep.
That's because you're not on the other side of the fence, because they're going to take themselves with them. So one of the popular things I've heard from some very popular teachers of the time, that I've heard freedom defined as, let me see if I can get it right, doing what you want, with who you want, with whoever you want, as many times as you want, something along these lines, right? Well, to me, that screams of selfishness and self-centeredness. At first glance, it sounds great. Well, I can do all these things that I want. I want this, I want that. But in an untrained vessel where you don't have your physical body, your mental clarity, your emotional state, and your purpose lined up, that idea of freedom is coming from that very limited bandwidth or worldview that we talked about before. It's developed in those first 7 years of your life at your core beliefs. So your core beliefs are always going to be somewhat built around the concept of lack and limitation. So if our freedom is defined that way, like I can do whatever I want, and a lot of people I know a lot of people that I've worked with who've experimented with like polyamorous relationships, and it never ends well.
Never.
So yeah, there's this thing, it's a concept of thinking freedom, but it's thinking freedom from this place of inherent limitation, because we have all these unspoken agreements and all these things that we say that we're not going to do. So we try to make these rules around this stuff, and we haven't solved ourselves as human beings yet. So that concept of freedom, since it comes from the place of inherent self-centeredness, is one of the biggest fallacies of our time. It's a massive trap, because you're going to take all your baggage to the other side, and you're going to experience the exact same things over and over and over and over again, hopefully until you learn the lesson. Then again, most people haven't really committed to a course of action where they can learn these lessons and overcome them. So how then would we obtain freedom? Freedom also comes from structure. That's the paradox. But the structure has to be a successfully working system that's time tested and proven.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, for example, a lot of kids from my generation, if they weren't shaping up, they were shipped out to like military school.
Yep.
And I'm not advocating that as the best solution, but at least in those times, one thing that absolutely worked was the kids who went to military school learned a structure that had been time tested and proven to work a specific way in terms of understanding basic tenets of discipline, basic tenets of respect and reverence, and these kinds of things. It might not have been the best system overall, but for the kid who lacked discipline, who lacked reverence, who lacked respect, that might have been a great solution. It gave them discipline toward a certain thing that then changed who they were. So an appropriate structure needs to be principally based, not personality based. And this is the whole thing with the freedom paradox, is when we talk about freedom in the sense of me, that's personality based, 100%. So when I talk about freedom in that modern context, where a lot of teachers are teaching this thing about being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, because you somehow have arrived in this place, they usually kind of sell through the idea of like, it's the step past having financial independence, that freedom is the ultimate thing, but it's not. Fulfillment is. Because when you're truly fulfilled, you don't need any of those things. You already have it. You can cultivate it inside of you. So there's this illusion of freedom based on self-centeredness, but selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our troubles, is a line that was written in one of the 10 most influential books in the world. That was the original 12-step book. That's a really interesting line. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our troubles. That was specifically related to addiction. And the relevance there is at the time that was written in the 1930s, like if you were an alcoholic, for example, you had a 0% chance. And just zero. You weren't going to make it. You were going to die an alcoholic. The 12-step process created a 75% success rate, because it was the first protocol that addressed a physical and mental disease through a spiritual solution. But one of the key lines of that book was selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our problems. So we have all kinds of precedents. This is just my thinking. Like if you go back thousands of years before that, and the Hermetic trainings that predate all religion, godlessness and mere opinion are the greatest faults of the human being. That sounds a lot like selfishness and self-centeredness to me.
Yeah, it does.
Self-centeredness is when everything is about me. Selfishness is when everything is for me. Dr. Vitz says in her book, The You You've Never Met, like what I quoted before, the only problem we ever have as people is ourselves.
Is ourselves.
I think I butchered that, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So there's this paradox around all these things that we take into relationships. And as it applies to men in our era today, there's less accountability than ever for these things. And in large part, when men don't have purpose, when they're not in command of their body, therefore they can't control their thoughts. And 90% of our personalities developed in those formative years, they're not seeking a partner. They're not seeking a union. They're finding someone who replaces their mother figure.
Yeah.
So they're mirroring back in large part a lot of the feminine traits. And then they're finding that in a mate. And women, because men have in large part left their posts in modern society, end up feeling like they have to drive the process more. So we see this shift in polarity from the masculine to the feminine.
Yep.
Because it's not necessarily a gender thing. It's an energetic, the masculine and feminine energy. And I don't mean in the way that we talk about in identity politics. I mean, like if you look back at ancient identifications of like the principles of the energy behind these genders. Mm-hmm. So when men start to mirror more feminine traits, then the women start developing more masculine traits. And how that comes out in relationships is a lot of men feel like the woman is controlling, that they're criticizing, that they're trying to lead them a certain way, because the man has inadvertently created a romantic parenting relationship. He's seeking more someone who's mommy. And we hear this all the time. Like, you talk to someone, a man, and he says, well, I have to go check with the boss. Like, if they're making a big mistake, check with the boss. Now, I'm not advocating you just go and do whatever you want. I mean, maybe, of course,
there has to be structure.
There has to be structure. You would discuss all important decisions, but you wouldn't come at it from the angle of, I'm a little boy who wants something. I have to go check with mommy to make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
So this is the distortion that we experience. And that might sound shaming for a lot of men. It's hush if you've experienced that. Just know everyone's going to experience that. It's not just you until you've done some training. So these ideas, like how this is unfolded for men in modern times, is we're constantly leaking energy through this daily container. We leak it through not having purpose. We leak it through the body-centric state. We leak it through the lack of will, which is our mental acuity. We don't have any control. I mean, men already struggle with emotions.
Right.
Men are a little bit more simplistic when it comes to emotions, by and large. And so those other three things, those other three precursors that give us really the power to become emotionally fluent, purpose, command of the body, and having control of our mental state, if those aren't in place, then we're really screwed. We don't even know how to interpret emotions coming from that platform at all. And so how on earth then are we going to be able to be in a leadership role and be the protector for our women? Well, the short answer is you can't, because you're wondering why mommy's mad at you.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to stand up, stand in, and lead.
And this is really important, because I want to touch on this, because what men and women a lot of times do not understand until they come to a coach like us who have this experience and expertise is that men need respect more than anything else in order to feel like fulfilled in that relationship. But a woman can't respect a man who isn't leading and who doesn't make her feel safe, because a woman needs love and safety more than anything else. And she doesn't feel spiritually, emotionally, sexually, mentally, physically, financially safe with a man who's not leading. And that's why I wanted you on this podcast, because as one of the top 5 men that I respect the most in this entire world, because you are so manly, because you have so much leadership, I think that your creation of the Man School and then your partnership with the Purpose Company for this reason is so incredibly, it is one of the biggest movements of our generation and even beyond that. And it's so needed right now, because that's what we're lacking in relationships. That polarity that you talked about, it's exhausting. I've been in 2 marriages where I felt like I had to be the one to lead, and I felt like I had to, because if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done. And it wasn't like an expectation of like, it's not going to get done right. No, it's just not going to get done.
Yeah, it sits undone. Right. Yeah, exactly. And thank you, by the way. So guys who are listening to this, no woman is sitting there drawing up her checklist of features that she wants in a man and says, oh yeah, gaming for endless hours, that's attractive.
Yeah.
Checking out to porn all day, that's what I want, man. Not fulfilling his word, that sounds perfect. I've been looking for that the whole time.
Empty promises,
let's check that
words
box.
and actions that don't match.
Yeah, commitment,
Those
unspoken.
are going on the list, friends.
Let's put all these on there and be like, I want that in a guy. So this is, I created Man School. It's a call to action for men to stand up because they've stepped away. And the women notice this, and you can see this massive polarity shift in our world, and it drives women crazy. So a lot of times men will say, well, my woman's very controlling, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, she's controlling, but she doesn't trust you. So women oftentimes aren't even aware of the tests that they put men through. So a lot of guys will say, my wife just plays these games. She asks me all these questions, says all these things. I think for women, that's more of like, it's in the biology where you're seeking affirmation that if I ask these questions, I'm going to if you're even asking the question, by the way, it means you're not having the experience of
Yep.
feeling protected and feeling safe and all these
Yep.
things. So when those questions come up, guys get irritated because it reminds them exactly who they picked. Mom, did you clean your room? This kind of thing.
Your wife is holding you accountable in those moments.
Yeah.
It's not that they're asking you just to piss you off. It's that they're trying to hold you accountable, because a relationship without accountability has an automatic 85% chance of divorce. Automatic.
They're asking because they already feel outside of the masculine feminine container. They already feel the polarity balance isn't correct. And so if you've waited to that point where you're being asked, that's the call to action to step up the game, not dig in and then squabble. Women don't want like a shopping buddy or a roommate in a man. They want
We have
someone
girlfriends for that.
Yeah, they don't want someone else to go on girls' night out. They want the man to fulfill that masculine energy, to be the man of his word, to be the man who drives leadership and is forward thinking and forward acting. And when something needs to be done, it's done immediately.
Yeah.
That's when those questions stop, by the way, guys. It's not when you complete the assignment that the mommy figure then gave you and then waiting for the next thing. Because what happens is it creates this void. So women are then always looking for the next thing undone, because again, that's this kind of inherent to the biology. It's where else am I not being taken care of?
Yeah.
Where else am I going to find the next disappointment? And so this has kind of become this static. So when men start to lead from the front, when they plug those holes, those energetic leaks in their masculine container, they start getting respect. And as you mentioned, like that's one of the most important things. But guys, you have to earn it.
Yeah.
Respect is not, this is one of these things in our world today where everyone, uses the word respect. Well, you better have taken the steps to earn that before those words even come out of your mouth. Otherwise, you've lost even more credibility.
Yep.
And I do believe that all human beings should be inherently treated with respect from the beginning. But we're talking about earning these things in the context of a relationship. That's something that comes as evidence and proof of leadership. So yeah, I think that the men have a lot of work to do. And I think that as they do that, in the emotional sobriety training curriculum, Dr. Vitz says there's never, for long anyway, one healthy person and one unhealthy person in a relationship.
Yeah.
One of two things will happen. Either the healthy person is leading by example, and that creates an entrainment for the other person to follow. They want to come up to that level because the demonstration is so strong, it pulls them up. They're not being told to come up. They just follow because that's the energy lead. It's like if you have a couple of people who are really bad with rhythm and you have like a really good drummer in the room, all of a sudden everyone's good at rhythm. They can entrain to that beat. But if you have someone who's really got their stuff together, who's totally independent and healthy, and the other person's not, and they're demonstrating, and that other person chooses not to come up, they're just going to ultimately vibrate away. And that's okay. Either way is a win, because now you've gotten to the place of reality.
Yep. And that's so important to note, is that that's the whole purpose of a relationship. I think that people don't understand that they think that a purpose of a relationship is to make me happy or to make me happier.
Right.
Whereas the purpose is to grow together and to have a mission statement and to have to be going towards something. And I don't think we spend enough time when we're dating figuring that out and figuring out what the mission statement could be alongside this other person. And my personal mission statement, does this other person have the tools to balance that out and to further amplify that mission? I want to real quick talk about purpose as it pertains to men. We've kind of touched on it throughout, but for the purpose course that you guys have, talk about the course, talk about why it's so important and how it will help amplify marriages. And then and man school too, like how that works and how that is helping men rise to the occasion.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, in part because I became obsessed with this concept of purpose about 6 years ago. And as I trace this down and I think about what happened, is I've had like a a written mission statement that I've lived from for like the last 30 years. So I was very much in touch with my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And a really interesting thing happened because I noticed that one of the biggest challenges was that a lot of people seem to be lacking fundamental purpose. And I'm not talking about people who aren't making it, because the groups that I work with, either in the physical training or the executive coaching platform that we have, these are high achievers, they're leaders, they're seekers, they're people who are looking for more. So I started taking an independent study with our people in our community and beyond the walls of our community who fit that same archetype. And it was shocking to me that over 90% in this 6-year study of leaders, seekers, and high achievers couldn't state their purpose. And those who could, the 10%, and it was always like a fascinating thing, but they would say, huh, I've not thought about that. Now, to me, I can't think of a more important question as a starting point in life, other than what's my purpose? Why am I here? And yet societally, we're under this mass hypnosis where this concept of purpose has been completely extracted from us. And we're not thinking about it along the way. It's not like sometimes we kind of get, through life chewed up a little bit. So we find different levels of maturity. We start getting our body in shape. No one's thinking, yeah, like I need to work on my purpose skills. We don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
So this to me was super intriguing. And so what I found was we had people who were finding purpose through our work and getting themselves whole, but it wasn't happening at the level that I expected. And then those who thought they had purpose, what they were really describing was more something that was like a passion of theirs, or like their family or their kids. And the best description I heard of purpose is when Dr. B brought this company to me called the Purpose Company. We later collaborated with them on this module that we're talking about right now. Their definition for purpose, and they're like world-class experts on this topic. They must have been thinking like me, but for many years beforehand, is the best of what you have to help others. And instantly, in my mind, that aligned exactly with the values and beliefs of Lifted Academy, where we talk about moving from a body-centric or a self-centered state into a powered-centered state, thinking outside of us. So this idea of the best of what we have to help others was right in line with our way of thinking. Your purpose, it's not your family, it's not your job, it's not your hobby. It's something that's deeper. It's not the things that you want to do. It's the thing that should wake you up in the morning where you feel like you have to do it.
Yes.
So this company, the Purpose Company, they created this this assessment. It's not like a personality test. It's not one of these things. It's the most accurate. It's freakishly accurate. They created this assessment that takes you like 20 or 30 minutes. You just answer a ton of questions. And they break out purpose into 4 different elements, to where there's 2 things that we all kind of come into this world with, just that's at the basis of who we are. Then there's 2 things that we kind of acquire over time. And those 4 different elements of purpose all of a sudden give all kinds of clarity to your life, because purpose isn't something like you're going to say, I should be this. There's going to be dimensions to it. So through this assessment, like after you answer all these questions, you see these 4 elements of purpose. And then you see like your frustrations and blind spots based on your archetype. You see your core values and beliefs, and it gives you what's called a purpose factor and a fulfillment factor. So it's super complete. Like it brings you this point of clarity, and you have like this 50-page report that goes with it, so you can read up on all the different archetypes. Now, to me, that's like putting like a red dot on your life map, because until you are here, like if you've ever been lost in the airport, you seek that thing where it says you are here. It's like, thank God, now at least I know. But we don't have that culturally in our life. So think about this for a moment. Like I've often said, or I recently said this on a call and it kind of stuck. Most people are like trying to get through life, like trying to navigate San Francisco metaphorically with a map of Chicago. We don't have a map or a destination. We never put that pin on the map that says you are here. That's our purpose. So we're aimless. If we're aimless, we're going to seek things that give us short-term relief. And these are all the things that exist in that body-centric state. So you can see how all these things parallel each other and how all they drive the next levels of entanglements and addictions and compulsions and dysfunction and limiting self-beliefs. These all go together in large part because we don't come into this world, or it's shortly beaten out of us, this concept of purpose. So we brought this company in, the Purpose Company. That's one of our front end pieces now. And then we found a way to kind of make this thing even more useful. What we found after doing this with a bunch of people, because you get your archetype. Now, there's like a 1 in 625 chance that you have the exact same archetypes as someone else. So you're going to have differences.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yeah, it's very rare to have two people the same. And so it's within those differences, like I mentioned before, all successful relationships, you have to be independent first.
Right.
This is in part why. If you're not independent and we have differences, that's going to create frustrations and resentments. If I'm independent and you're different than me, I look at that through a totally different lens. I now
appreciate
value
it.
your opinion. I appreciate it. I look at it with wonder and curiosity. Wow, Cam does it this way. She thinks this way. I've never thought of it that way before. What would it be like if I took the best of what I have, we match it with the best of what she has? Now we have collaboration and synergy. This is, like I said before, or early on the podcast, if your home isn't the place you look forward to coming home to, it's your sanctuary. Most people are thinking, yeah, right. This is how you get there. Like when you start to appreciate the differences for what they are, and you look at that not with resistance, but awe and wonder, because you've worked out your own stuff to the point where you have such great clarity that you're in charge and in control. Now you start to become super curious. And in using that purpose module this way, you become a master communicator. Here's how that works. If I, like, for example, I'm a teacher. That's my natural advantage, according to, and of course, it's like, I spent my whole life teaching. So like everything that came out, I'm like, man, that's so weird that it just nailed every single element of what I had as evidence in my life, this assessment. And I was one who already had purpose. So I'm a teacher. My wife's a builder. If you ask the people who created this, that's like oil and water.
Yeah.
Right. Anyone who's made it through this far in the podcast knows I talk a lot. That drives a builder insane. The builder is on the whiteboard in the first 30 seconds, bullet pointing stuff, saying, let's go. This is what we do. I'm like, nope. That first bullet's actually factually incorrect. The second one needs refinement. Here's the lesson behind that. And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, we got to get this. And I'm like, no, we got to make it right first. So if
truth tellers are similar.
Yeah.
Because I'm a truth teller.
You have these components that go into this where if you don't understand the differences and where that brings individual value, you drive each other nuts. And then all of a sudden you're in that romantic parenting thing because you've probably attracted the same archetype as someone very familiar to you, but that's what humans do. We go where we know. So this gives you this unique ability to start to understand not only our partners differently, but when you practice this enough, like if you really take that, I always task people with, like in my coaching, like I'll say, do this for a month, whatever this is. Because if you practice anything for a month, an hour a day, you're going to be above 99.9% of people in the world who have exposure to that particular thing. So if you spent an hour a day studying all the archetypes of purpose as developed by the Purpose Company experts in this subject, you can be talking to someone for 10 minutes and you'll say, that's an overseer. That's a builder. That's a teacher. So now instead of talking to the friction of situation, circumstance, and personality, I'm now talking to the archetype. I now know how they work. And if I've done emotional sobriety training, I'm now talking to the archetype and the self-belief. In other words, I'm now creating world-class win-win solutions in real time. I'm not wasting
There's no judgment. There's only appreciation and understanding. So there's also there's no emotion of anger or frustration or any of that. Like you're not being flooded anymore in conversations. You're just able to maintain complete emotional sobriety, complete level-headedness because you're coming from curiosity and from communication. You've filled those skills gaps.
You accomplish more that way, sometimes in one day, than most people might accomplish in 10 years.
Agreed.
So I mentioned synergy and collaboration before. That's the true aim of two independent people getting together. That's what a mission-based marriage is. You are in that space exactly as you're describing, and every day you're in the place of creation. Masculine energy is forward momentum, by the way. And so you're in this drive and in this forward push, and you're leading from the front, and you're in the space of creating in the new. And most people don't, they're not only not creating, they're not really even living. They're repeating. They're repeating all the things from their subconscious mind. This is a scientific fact as the best of what we know in neuroscience today. They're repeating all those same traumas endlessly. Oh, it's so boring. Right. And I say that from my own experience of being boring, by the way, for anyone who just thinks I judge them. No, it's like I had to earn this. It's like I had to work through this process to be able to get to a place where I'm past it. But man, I would never give anything up again to go back to those familiar states. So that's one of the really cool things that we've mined out of this purpose assessment. And what that did was it gave us a way to take like your purpose factor and your fulfillment factor. And then we bring that into the next step of Lifted Academy architecture that's part of this on purpose module, as we call it. And that's what I call the North Star framework. So we've got to put some legs to this new concept. Or even better, let's put some wings to it.
Yeah.
So we can use this in forward momentum. And so how this North Star thing works is having my core values and beliefs and my elements of purpose. How do I plug this into my day-to-day life? So we look at the spaces of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational, and societal. And it goes like this. I'm saving people like 10 grand right now, by the way, by actually giving this away on the podcast. So we walk through those steps, and then we say it like this. Where am I right now? Because now I have a much better idea of my map. Physically, where am I? Am I in peak shape and condition, or do I need to get, like, you just outline exactly mentally, where am I? Where's my emotional quotient? And we define that as clearly as we can. Now, here's an important step that flies under the radar with all manner of attempting to create. Is we never think about what are my minimums. And most people think when I say that, like other coaches, they think, oh, we shouldn't be thinking that way. If you're not thinking that way, you're going to fall into that. Expansion and contraction is a built-in function of the universe. We get excited.
There is.
Beyond where our normal baseline is, that's the regression toward the mean. So we have to identify, here's where I'm at right now. Let's say physically, for example, here's my physical state. I'm never going to go below this, like no matter what happens. So now we've defined these places that create a checkpoint. It's a system of checks and balances. So if we start sliding, we don't slide all the way back totally unaware and then wake up one day with the illusion of forward progress, just getting back to where we were before. We can say, nope, I set that minimum. In understanding where I am and what my minimum is, now I projected who do I really want to become? Like, where's my calling? Like, what's in me that I recognize physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, societally? Like, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And we start fleshing that out. Here's the second big pro tip on this that I figured out years ago. From that standpoint, if we stop there, almost everyone falls short. They won't actually achieve those things because they're limited self-beliefs. So we have to think even one step beyond it. I call it thinking dimensionally. So once I've defined who I want to be in all those categories, I now look at it this way. Having achieved that, who does that person want to become? And you start thinking from that platform. And you can do that as many times as you want.
Yeah.
In fact, the more you do that, the more you put yourself into the place of thinking in terms of potential. This works completely opposite the way our brain is wired. So when we're doing this exercise, we're actually shifting into a different part of our brain. It's like we're going into a special room to access special information. Because if normally when I take someone through this and I say, who do you want to be? They're like, well, my job, if I could get off 2 hours early and make $2 more per hour, I'd be totally happy. It's like, man, you're playing small.
Yeah.
I want to work half as much and make twice as much and serve humanity at a high level. That's a goal worth doing. Because what we do initially when we're asked that question of who do I want to be, we're thinking from this vantage point today of the limitations and frustrations we have right now. Yet at the same time, it has to be believable enough for our brain to vest energy into it.
Yep.
So that's the secret. We think dimensionally beyond that goal. And this is like a living, breathing document. Once we've completed that all the way, we now funnel that down to what I call a life mission statement. This North Star framework that I'm referencing, that's like a life charter. It's your map of where am I? What am I not willing to go below? Who do I want to be? Who would that worst person want to become? We distill that into a life mission statement. Then we take that into the next piece. So you see how this walks down. It's like I discover what my purpose is. I find out my core values and beliefs. I find my frustrations and blind spots. I find my purpose and fulfillment factor. Now I'm galvanized with like meaning in my life. I take this and I write out this dimensional map. So I'm building, Dr. Vitz and I call this the miracle map.
Okay.
This is actually where miracles happen, by the way. It's like we've had everything from a number of different incurable diseases overcome to incurable health conditions to even spontaneous remissions. I'm not promising those things because that was never our intention. These things just happen when you begin to align with purpose physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We're not in this space of creating all this chaos and blocks in our life based on toxic chemistry.
Yeah.
But as we walk these things down bit by bit, we now have this greater clarity that we can put into what I call a legacy blueprint. So our concept of legacy is a little different. It's not what happens when you're dead and what do people say about you. It's not just the impact you leave when you leave the world. It's the impact you leave when you leave every room. So it's a blueprint for living. It's so important because if we're not in the awareness of the now, then our legacy is something we're just hoping something's going to happen. So like one of the ways I shake people's trees on this, it's what's your legacy going to be, dude? That you're good at playing video games, that you were good at watching porno while your wife was asleep, that you were good at like shopping for shoes or finding a good sale. Like that's, come on, we gotta do better, kids. We gotta aim higher.
Gotta do better, kids.
We gotta do better. So this legacy concept, when we've cleared out all this other stuff, it galvanizes us with purpose and force. Like we now have more vitality, we have more power that we can put to this concept of moment to moment. And this idea, Kim, of moment to moment came from a podcast that I was on where I was talking and someone said, wow, you have a great life philosophy. Like tell me like what is life? They wanted me to answer this question, what is life? And I'm like, oh God, now I'm on the spot because every philosopher through history from Plato to Socrates, everyone else has been tasked with answering this question of what is life. And so on the fly, I just kind of spit out something that I ended up being pretty happy with. I didn't want to come from philosophy. I didn't want to come from theology. So what I said was life is a series of moments that we experience moment by moment under the impression of linear time.
Yeah.
I wanted to be non-contentious. I didn't want it to be opinion-based. I didn't want to come from philosophy or theology. And I also wanted there to be some hope infused in that because I think everyone could agree. It's like, I've not had anyone disagree with me that that's how you could view life. It's a series of moments to stack on top of each other moment by moment under this impression of what we call time. So then how do we fill our time? Because inherent in that definition is the hope of if we can learn to master the moment, we now know what life is because we've mastered our life. So this is the power of that teaching. If we can learn how to start from the beginning, that most fundamental question of who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? If we can answer those things clearly and coherently with power behind that, it gives us much greater leverage on getting control of our body, because that's the next step as we walk through linear time. We're literally walking through time moment by moment under the physical laws and physical reality. So we have a physical body. Well, every single thing we experience in the body is directed by our chemistry. So we have to then learn to get command of our chemistry, therefore getting control of our body. Now, an important thing happens along this journey. When we have purpose and we've now gotten control of our chemistry, therefore our body, we now see things clearer. So the next step begins to happen automatically. That's mental acuity. It's critical thinking. It's discernment. It's our ability to focus. It's that will. We now learn how to begin to focus the will when it's not clouded by not having the you are here thing on our map. We don't have a map. Our will is all over the place. When we have it, we know how to channel our energy. so we get control over our mind. You, by the way, you cannot have control over your mind. I don't care how smart you think you are until you have command of your body. This lesson to me really came when I had a guy, he must have had like a 250 IQ. He's one of the, he's the CEO of one of the biggest technology and most respected technology companies in Europe. The guy's just absolutely brilliant, totally not in control of his chemistry, totally not in control of his life. 100 millionaire plus. So he has the experiences that everyone has because he's not in control of his body. So there's a sequence to this. As you get control of the body, you start to get control of the mind. If you already have a strong mind, even better, because now you're using it the right way. But in my experience, you require that level of momentum to tackle this concept of emotional fluency and emotional sobriety.
Yeah.
You can't have it otherwise. If your body's flooded with chemistry, by definition, because all an emotion is, it's a chemistry match with a thought. You can't have emotional sobriety, meaning you can never develop emotional fluency if you don't have those other things. So this purpose module is like step one to what we call the lifted life path. And this works the exact same way in our program called Mission-Based Marriage. We walk through these steps bit by bit by bit by bit until we literally have a fundamental blueprint for mastering life by learning how to master the moment. Because if we can master the moment, and if our life is a series of moments, moment by moment to play out over time, we now have an actual map and blueprint on how to do anything. So relationships,
mastering your entire life, your relationships, your parenting, your weight, your finances, everything.
Yeah. So there's magic that does exist. And we come to find that we've blocked ourselves from it. So much of this is already in us. We have potential that is so much greater as humans than we've been led to believe. Mm-hmm. We have the ability to be completely infinite in our application, but we get blocked in our humanness, the places of selfishness and self-centeredness.
We have the potential, but I want to, one of my favorite quotes from you is that we have the potential, but potential means that you currently suck.
And, I can't take credit for owning that. One of the things that drives me nuts is when I see all these talking heads using like quotes from other people. And it's like, I know that that's not yours. So I don't know what the origin of that was. I originally learned it from, I lifted it from a contemporary of mine as a strength and conditioning coach years ago, a guy named Dave Tate, who runs a company called Elite Fitness Systems. And he really knows his stuff, but he said it as, like potential is an insert, whatever the culture was, like French for currently sucks, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And he was applying that to like lifters. Oh, this guy's got potential. It means like, hey, he could be good. He's not good now. Or you'd be saying this to someone who's elite. And here's how. Potential means that you've got work to do. And I do have a definition that's mine. I'll give you that one, because when people say, oh yeah, I'm working on it. Well, I have a definition for that. Working on it means you're currently distracted by XYZ. Otherwise, you'd be in the doing of it.
You're either doing it or you're not.
You're either doing it or you're not. The same way that's like, I define trying as the ego's way of preemptively accepting failure as an option.
Okay.
You can't try. What you're doing is just made an excuse for why you failed under this kind of like weak-hearted attempt to mask the fact that you're not going to give it your all. Like you either made an attempt and were successful or not. Trying doesn't exist. Trying is just saying, hey, I'm going to fail. I'm setting you up for it. So when I say sorry, you'll know I really don't mean it. I'm just sorry that I wasn't able to do it because I had to own up to it. So,
I love this because it goes back to you're always training for something. You're either in every single rep, in every single moment to moment of your life, you are either training to have a great marriage or you're training to have a crappy one. You're training to be a great parent or you're training to be a crappy one. You're training to have your body under control and be in control of your thoughts and your everything, or you're training to have no control and you live in chaos. You're training to have a purpose and you're training to live on that map, and you're training to, go through the map of San Francisco by having a map of San Francisco, and or you're training to again, live in chaos and just wander around aimlessly.
I love that. So yeah, that's what we call the three fundamentals of Lifted Academy. Self-belief, right? Like our self-beliefs, our chemistry, which we talked about, and training. Because exactly as you said, we have this connotation with training in our world today that it's something we just chose to do and now we're pursuing it. But if we're not, that's a form of training because it's a
Mhm.
repetition-based model. We're
Yeah.
repeating a series of beliefs. So I love that you brought that up. That's such an important part to all of this because this is what leads to your first thing that you mentioned, complacency.
Yeah.
When we're not seeking something the affirmative, we don't understand that we are intentionally, although through the fog of complacency, training to get worse because you can't stay the same. Time is going to march on
Yep.
moment by moment under the perception of time. So if we're staying the same, we're actually just getting better at being worse every moment. That's
Ooh,
a
if we're
form of
staying the
training.
same, we're getting better at being worse.
Yeah.
I told you guys there were so many nuggets you're going to want to tattoo on your face. I told you. So I
Awesome.
have like 5 written down here. Dependent people can't be depended on. We go where we know. So talk about who we've talked about purpose and if you don't know your purpose or you're wondering about it or you're in a job that you're like, I'm good at it, but I don't know that I love this. I don't know that this is where I want to be forever. You're just not sure who you are. You don't have purpose and you don't know what your legacy is. That's where you come to Ted and Dr. Vitz for the purpose course. If you have any addictions, if you have, if you drink coffee every day, if you, any of that, you don't have full command over your body, you're going to come to them for recomp and for emotional sobriety. If you argue at all with anyone, you're going to come to them for emotional sobriety. Um, okay, talk about who Man School is for.
Man school, it's not just for men, by the way. It's also for women who want to understand their men or embrace the masculine part of themselves. Because, like, if you ask people what should be the balance, like in each person, because I think we now know that like men have heard that there's a masculine feminine balance within a man, there's a masculine feminine balance within a woman. That balance is, I just learned this recently, in fact, from one of my mentors. And going back to like again like the ancient hermetic teachings, which are always such a solid place to start because that predates like everything else.
Yeah.
That balance is designed to be 70-30. So if I'm a man, I should be 70% masculine, 30% feminine. By the way, like a lot of times when I'm working with high level executives or founders who are having financial problems, they're not enough in their feminine energy to receive the money. The feminine state has an
Oh.
element, a high level of nurturing and receivership. So a lot of
Mhm.
these guys who are mega talented and they're like, I don't get it. It's like, I'm the best in my field and there's no money to show for it. They
Yeah.
haven't learned to embrace that nurturing, whether it's client nurturing or nurturing the flow of the money and the receivership of it. That's and this
Interesting.
goes on
Okay.
to the financial part. So, and for women, as it pertains to man school, there's that 30% of the blade that they might want to sharpen by really learning what those masculine like leadership qualities are, that forward direction, that vital and driving force. Because not only then do they know how to call to that within themselves, but what to look for in their partner. Um, I look at man school as sometimes either like a precursor to our mission-based marriage program, or as an adjunct to it because we include parts of it because you kind of can't not. There's going to be a day where I got to have the men do a call to action.
Right.
But man school is really for anyone who wants to understand kind of like the inner workings of the human condition and exactly how to overcome. Like I don't leave ambiguity anywhere. We just finished actually tomorrow. We're wrapping up an 8-week cohort with our in-person day. And every single person who finished this met the stated objective of the program. And that's that every single person who started on day one made a commitment to being the most powerful, most productive version of themselves they had ever experienced in their life. Every one of them achieved that.
I love that. That's
In eight
awesome.
weeks. In 8 weeks. And so
They weren't
we
trying.
expect,
They weren't working
yeah,
on it. They did it.
right. They did it. Man school is for also for someone who wants to be held for the fire, they're held to the fire, and learn how to not only become comfortable in those places, but to thrive in those places. Because really to be great at anything, you have to learn how to be able to stand in the fire
Yeah.
perpetually. So I set up that curriculum in a way because I've worked with people who are like the best in the world at a variety of different things. So I developed that program that mirrors that level. I'm not saying, oh, these people are the best. Let's take one little nugget of what they do. It's like, I'm going to show you exactly how they got to be the best in the world at that. And I'm going to hold you to that standard. And they might not hit that standard, but if they get like 70, 80, 90% of it, and before they were 0%, their life is so fundamentally changed, whether it's in business and relationships or something else, that there's no going back into the smaller box. And that happens in like 8 weeks. We grab people, we pull them through, but you have to be ready for a big change and big experience. It's kind of similar to how we do this thing that we do. It's called mission-based marriage. So I'm gonna touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
You're a marriage coach, and this will probably be interesting to some of your viewers. One of the things, like we mentioned before, like if you ask anyone, how'd the date go? We had great chemistry. Before you know it, now you're together. Chemistry is what binds. That's the first problem, right? But pretty universally, if you ask people, well, what's the most important thing in a marriage or in a partnership, most people are going to say communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yet again, like what specifically did you do to train for communication to be in this relationship where you're saying that's the most important thing? Most people consider communication doing what I told you to do. That's like their version of communication, like in a union. It's, well, if I told you to do it, I expect you to do it. Otherwise, I'm not getting my way. Therefore, we have bad communication. That obviously has an endpoint clearly in sight. So what we do, we take some of these different trainings that we've just talked about, and we start to build a common language for communication. Purpose being one of them. Like we talked about that earlier. Like if I know your archetype and I can speak to your archetype, I'm not speaking to the resistance. I'm not speaking to the circumstance. That's a language.
Yeah.
You become high level in communication by understanding the language of the archetype. And since there's 4 different levels of this for each person and multiple different subsets, you can become a master of speaking to those transitions. The next thing is, like we talked about, emotional sobriety, our core values and beliefs and our subconscious programming, how that works. When you start to learn how to speak to the self-belief as well as the archetype, your communication is going to be extremely refined and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned body recomposition training. That's the training that I give to people that gets them in command of their body. And if you're sitting there saying you have command of your body, give me 3 minutes with you, I'll change your world. You don't.
Yeah.
You just don't. I'm not saying that from a place of arrogance. There's things that we've been told that are fundamentally not true, because the distance between cause and effect doesn't show up right away, and we don't even know what's happening. We don't recognize it as a physical phenomena. But almost no one has command over their body until they go through a specific training that gets that. So if I go through that training, I now understand my chemistry. So in mission-based marriage, we teach these 3 fundamental pillars of communication by installing these 3 languages into the union and within the marriage. And so no matter what your problems have been before, if you have desire, and I can now speak from a place of chemical equilibrium, and I'm speaking to the archetype and the self-belief, not the frustrated personality that's chaotic in their own body right now in the situation, the circumstance, we instantly speak towards solution. It happens so fast. It's literally, well, we say it's magic because it is. Like if you look at the definition of magic or alchemy, it's turning one thing into something else or creating something new from something that wasn't there. It's magic.
And yeah, that's just from experience. So I've done 2 of you guys' programs now, and I'm starting the purpose course as well. So, and I've already gotten I already know, the archetype. So yeah, like that, it's absolute magic. That's truly what it is. I did not have command over my body. I did not have command over my emotions. I got really, really emotionally big whenever I wasn't being heard or seen or understood, and had that anxious attachment, like kind of like all of those tendencies. And yeah, the emotional sobriety was truly what created who I am now out of what
Amazing.
wasn't there before.
Yeah, it's always training, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what we don't know. This is so it's always fun to me. And really for me, what drove this process decades ago was because you could make a parallel to someone saying the exact same thing. Like if they weren't in physical shape, they say, wow, when I started training, I experienced all these deficits. Like either maybe I was overweight or I wasn't physically strong or I had no stamina. And now I present this way as having gone through this course of physical training. You just said the exact same thing in emotional training.
Hmm.
So there's this dimensionality to us that we don't recognize because we get blocked by being aimless without purpose and not having
Yep.
control and command of our chemistry. So we're always in this repetitive loop of this pre-programmed thinking. That's a very limited state. So as we begin to train into these altered state by tapping into a power centered state instead of a body centric state, and we begin to become fluent in these different languages, all potentials now begin to unfold as potential. In other words, that's a new reality we can create just by aligning with it. This kind of bypasses like a lot of the woo woo of the modern new age way of thinking, like manifestation. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to think this and it's going to fall out of the sky. You got to earn this. Like, like you just mentioned, like with emotional sobriety, self-trust, self-reliance, self-esteem, those are things you earned through training. None of this comes just from thinking it. I'm sorry if anyone read The Secret and is hoping that's still going to work, because it's not. It's like you have to put action to it.
Yeah.
There's always an action component to success. Yes, you have to align with the thought and the feeling together, but it's got to be backed up in the physical reality for it to work, because that's where we live. We live in the physical reality. So I love that you said that about the emotional sobriety training, because all these trainings work exactly the same way. And every
Hmm.
single person, until they do it, they've not received training. And so
Yeah.
you're not going to have this. When you go through the training, your perspective shifts. You become stronger. Just this, like the same way that if you're watching
Completely.
YouTube videos about fitness, you're not going to get any better at squatting or bench pressing by watching videos of it. You got to get your ass in the gym. You got to get under the bar.
Do the work.
You have to do the work. You have to have a plan of progression. You have to know what the techniques are. All this kind of stuff is the work. It works the same way in every dimension of our lives.
Yep. I agree. Well, I think with that, I think that's where we're going to end, because that was that point blank period.
Amazing. Thank you so
Amazing.
much for having me on. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for being
Yeah.
here. Thank you for the compliment. I feel better than I ever have too. And what's interesting is, it's funny. I I've talked about this with other friends that have gone through the training as well, and it's amazing to me how I used to eat the way that I did, and I used to do the things that I did and think, oh, this is normal, or this is, well, it's better than what it was when I grew up, or it's better than what, my family does, or whatever. And now, even if I were to, eat that way for one meal versus all day long, I feel like an absolute garbage can. And so, like, going back to that whole, like, well, it's okay because I've been good. Not even that. Like, and then like I forgot my meals at home on the kitchen counter, or I just ran through for convenience. It's not convenient to feel like absolute crap. Like, it's
Correct.
not convenient.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not
not at all.
convenient to feel like crap in your marriage, in your body, in your day, and nothing.
Yeah.
So
Every problem has a solution.
every problem has a solution, and it's literally at your fingertips. You just have to reach out and grab it. So,
Amazing.
thank you so much, Ted. I appreciate you so much. And you and Dr. V, take care.
Thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast. Great talking to you. Great seeing you. Keep it going, young lady. You're bringing lots of good into the world and you're rocking it right now.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Married and Connected podcast. I appreciate you so much. And if you have not left a review, I would absolutely adore you if you would go leave a review. It's how my podcast grows and gets in front of other people. I want to take a moment to share an important disclaimer, not for you, but for my legal team. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Now, while I am a certified marriage coach, I am not a licensed therapist, counselor, or medical professional. The information, opinions, and advice shared here are based on my experience, research, and expertise, but they are not a substitute for professional mental health, legal, or medical advice. Every relationship is unique, and what works for one couple may not work for another. If you're facing serious relationship struggles, mental health concerns, or other challenges, I encourage you to seek the guidance of a qualified professional. And by listening to this podcast, you agree that I, Cameron Alaricki, the Recognizing Potential Coaching brand, or the Married and Connected podcast are not responsible for any decisions that you make based on the content shared here. Your relationship, your choices, and your outcomes are ultimately in your hands.